Hello, everyone. Welcome to our October community call. As it was posted in the chat, this call is recorded. If you do not wish to be a part of this recording, please go ahead and leave the call. This call will be posted to YouTube later on. We guarantee sort of within the next 2 weeks, but usually it comes quite a bit sooner than that. So yeah, thank you all for being here. We always appreciate you being on our call. As always, you can find our code of conduct linked into the chat, but we take it very seriously, but most of all, we just be kind to each other. The agenda is also posted in the chat. We always post our agenda in the discussions section of the PowerShell repo. And there you can post topics, questions, and demos ahead of time. That's where we will facilitate demos going forward for calls. So we do have one demo lined up for today and then a number of topics. But throughout the call, we do want this to be interactive. We welcome all sorts of questions and topics. So if you would like to participate, go ahead and use the chat or the raise hand feature. You can also continue the discussion in the discussion on GitHub. So with that, we can go ahead and get started with our agenda. So the first topic is actually just kind of our schedule for the rest of the year for this call. So per usual, we are not planning on having a December call. Since we do this call on the third Thursday of the month, the way it falls is kind of right on the holiday season for most of us. And so we typically just skip the December call, and we're planning on doing that this year, which means that next month, our November call will actually be our final call of the year. And it also falls during Ignite this year, which is pretty fun. And we're planning on just having it be a community really celebration call. So it'll be a lot more demo driven, hopefully a lot more community participation, less of the PowerShell team, more of the community than a typical call. I already went ahead and created the discussion for it in GitHub, so I'm just going to go ahead and post it there. So just go ahead and start posting ideas for demos, things you might want to show off and celebrate. It's just really a way for us to celebrate all the different things you guys have done with PowerShell over the last year. We might have a short section of a few minutes just of the PowerShell team recapping some releases from the past year and maybe celebrating PowerShell 7.5. But other than that, we really want it to be focused on things that the community has done this year. So go ahead and post in that discussion what you would like to show. There is no demo that is too simple or too basic or too advanced. So we welcome the full spectrum. It's always appreciated. I think that's all that I have for that update. Next up, we do want to remind that PowerShell 7.2 is quickly approaching end of life. November 8th is coming up for 7.2 end of life. A common question that comes up is, yes, we are working very closely with partners in Microsoft to remind them and support them through this update. I know in particular, Azure Automation is planning to get out support for 7.4 very, very soon here. And so just a reminder that if you haven't gone ahead and started your testing on 7.4, which is our current LTS, now would be the time to, as again, 7.2 end of life coming up in the next couple weeks. Yeah, I did see in the chat here asking if anybody from the team will be at Ignite. Steven is going to be there representing the team, so definitely look out for him and connect with him. He'll be so excited to talk to you and talk PowerShell. Let me go back to the agenda. All right, great. That's enough of hearing me talk. I'll pass things over to Tess, who's going to talk a little bit about OpenSSH.
Thanks, Sydney. Hi, folks. A quick update on OpenSSH. Some of you may have already seen it, but we released 9.8 on GitHub last week. Focus of this release was splitting the SSH server into a listener binary and a session binary, but there shouldn't be any major differences to the end user from this change. There were also a few security fixes included in this release that were also patched in Windows via version 9.5 also last week. These fixes relate to changes in SCP and SFTP, as well as the SSH agent. And you can check out our release notes for more information on the specifics. I also wanted to note that we're tracking an issue with the SSH server not starting after the Windows patch due to the permissions checks on the program data SSH and program data SSH logs folders that was added in version 9.4. So if you're seeing any trouble starting the SSH server after updating your Windows machine, the issue on our GitHub repo explains the expected folder permissions and how to fix that. As always, thanks for your feedback, and please open any issues on GitHub if you encounter any problems with the release. Thanks. Oh, Danny.
And the only thing to add to that is the 9.5 patch was applied to all versions of Windows where OpenSSH exists. So even if you're on server 19 and had OpenSSH 7.7, if you're up to date on your security patches, you will now have OpenSSH 9.5.
Great. Awesome. Thank you both. Next up on the agenda, I have Andy to give some updates on Script Analyzer and VS Code.
Hi, just getting a screen shared here. 1 second. Loss of permissions to allow from a Mac. Here we go. So first up, we got version 1.23 of PowerShell Script Analyzer out. This was a fairly small release. It mainly allowed us to test our brand new release pipeline that we've probably heard we're all working on internally. Lots of security stuff. So it is a nice, freshly, properly signed, newly tested release with a whole bunch of under the covers fixes to its build and release system. It does have a great community contribution for handling the redirect operators when they're not in stream order, so that is in there. And then I had wanted to get to share that there was a pre-release of VS Code out. We are still working on it, but it is up and coming pretty hot here. It does include that new PowerShell Script Analyzer. It has a great new feature from a community member that now lets you switch between using the call operator like ampersand and dot source, literally with period, when executing your scripts in the debugger. That was a long requested feature. I'd love to see that contribution come through and get in. We are also pending some updates from our amazing contributor, Justin Garotti, that will fix up the debugger in quite a few different ways. Some of those will be in the pre-release, some will not. And over on the VS Code site itself, if I can click underneath a bar you guys can't see, here we go. Very similarly, when this release comes out, it will exercise our completely up-to-date pipeline. I'm still working on the back end to get that pipeline, the requirements for it allowed so I can get this out. That's sort of what the delay is there. However, it is going to come with a great fix for, and I'm spacing on it, PowerShell shell integration. So upstream, VS Code kind of moved where the script was. If you are currently using the extension and you're like, wait, why did the shell integration script stop working? That's because the path to it just sort of needed to be adjusted. That fix is in here, as well as some fix for some expected environment variables for that shell integration script. We continue to work with the team over in VS Code on getting all that stuff to work better. And the good news on that front is, since we don't have to support Azure Data Studio as a thing anymore, in terms of our PowerShell extension on the marketplace, we get to update our VS Code engine finally. So we used to be stuck on older releases. We now get to support just straight up to date 1.94, I think was the latest release of VS Code in our package, which means we get to take in newer features from VS Code as they become available, rather than us go, we can't do that yet, our engine is out of date. So yeah, please look forward to the pre-release. It will be out momentarily, within a week, I'd say.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Andy, for all the hard work there. That's been really great to see. And I would say for both of these projects, really appreciate how community driven they are and all the community PRs and triage and work that goes into that. Next up, I have a docs update from Sean.
Howdy, folks. Let me drop some links here for you. Got a lot of stuff to talk about. Mostly it's updates to for new releases. I've added release notes for PS Resource Kit to cover the release history and talk about the changes in each version. We're now up to 1.1 Preview 2, which has a couple of new features. New commandlet compressed PS resource that allows you to create an upkeg without publishing it, so that you can then sign it before publishing it. And then there's, to support that, publish PS resource has a new parameter, nupkeg path, where you can point it at the nupkeg that you've built and publish it to your repositories. And as Andy said, there's been updates for script analyzers, so there's updated documentation. There's a couple new rules. I forget what they are. Would have to look at the release notes again. And then there was a couple of rules that became configurable in this version. So check out the new documentation there. Of course, we had another release of PowerShell 7.5 preview. We're up to preview 5 now. And I just want to call out, if you scroll through and see all of the changes here, there's a ton of contributions here from the community, and we certainly thank all of the community input that we're getting for these releases. And with that, there's a couple of highlights. If you haven't seen the performance improvement that Jordan Borean added for Array Edition, that's really cool. And 2 new commandlets, convert from XML CLI and convert to XML CLI. And you may be thinking, well, what are these for? We already had export and import CLI. Well, export and import CLI are file driven. They export writes to a file, import reads from a file. The convert to and convert from is about doing this in the pipeline. So now you can do things like this, where you convert objects to CLI XML in the pipeline and convert them back. Also added new release notes article for PS Readline. This is not new information, just split it out to its own article. So now you can see the release history of PS Readline, what version shipped in what version of PowerShell, and what the changes are, summary of the changes. And last but not least, we have one new article here in the PowerShell documentation about strategies for improving the accessibility of your output from PowerShell. If you're a user that uses a screen reader, you're probably very familiar with the pain of the screen reader trying to read the terminal screen. And so this article talks about ways that you can reduce the output on the terminal screen, move the output to a more accessible view like OutGrid view, or export it to other formats that can be opened in applications that are more accessible, like CSV format in Excel or HTML in your web browser, and so on. So that's it for the docs updates. It looks like, James, you had a question?
More thank you and a quick comment. It's great to see convert to and convert from ClickXML. And also, I'm sorry to be the proverbial mouse with the cookie. Could we get an import and export JSON? Because having completeness for any of the conversion scenarios is pretty important. Anything that we can convert to and convert from, we should also be able to import and export. Basically, it would make life so much easier.
That sounds like a good issue to add to the repo, and we look forward to PRs.
Cool.
So
Yeah.
And that's the end of my bit. And Sydney, back to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Sean. And yeah, totally agree. If there's not already an open issue in the repo, I would say go for it. With that, I think I'm passing things over to Michael to talk about Azure MFA.
Awesome. I will put the link for the context of the discussion in the chat. This is especially for anybody on the call or listening to the recording who's an Azure customer. Damien's not available today, but he asked if I could call this out in the community call. Azure is beginning the rollout of enforcing multi-factor authentication, and that docs page provides all the details. What you need to know for right now is it will start for the, and there is a process to ask for an extension, but that will happen within this calendar year, and the dates are all there. Next calendar year, in the first half of 2025, we'll see that start getting enforced for Azure PowerShell. The reason you might care for your release pipelines that you're using to deploy infrastructure as code, if they're using a user account to authenticate, then multi-factor authentication would start getting enforced, and that would cause your release pipeline to have a problem. So the answer is to move to an app ID or to managed identity, depending on the platform. But there are some cases, and this is the kind of, if the answer is you don't know, the thing to be aware of is for some organizations that have either homegrown or sort of, quote unquote, third party identity management solutions, some of those are or have been implemented to use user accounts, kind of like service accounts, instead of using an app registration and that kind of thing. So if you happen to be aware of a release pipeline within your organization that's using a user account to authenticate, this gives you a good 6 months or I don't know the dates, it's not published yet, but this gives you some heads up time to go take a look at that and see if that's going to be a problem and try to get ahead of it. And that's it. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Michael. The next topic I think comes back to me, and this was one that was requested in the GitHub discussion, but I'll put it in the chat. So you may have seen that I opened up a discussion topic in the PowerShell repo, which was, should we ship PowerShell 7 in Windows? And this sparked a lot of conversation. And I think the meta question for this call was like, hey, why did you guys open this question? Maybe some folks have heard us say in the past that this was an impossible task and that sort of thing. So like, is there something happening? Why now? And I can just give you like the answer, the very straightforward answer as to like why I opened up the discussion topic. And something you've probably heard us say many, many times, like over the years, if you've been on our calls or around the team, is that at Microsoft, sort of the customer voice is a lot louder than the engineering voice. So when we go to like make an ask or a request, if we have sort of customers asking for that directly, say to the team, that's going to carry a lot more weight than if we as the PowerShell team, say, hey, like PowerShell needs to be here, PowerShell needs to be there. So that's sort of an idea you've probably heard us say many, many times. Whenever we go talk to you guys at conferences, have talked to customers, it always comes up as one of the top requests to have PowerShell 7 in inbox in Windows. And so even though you probably feel like there's been no movement on the outside for many, many years, which is completely valid, it's something that's on our sort of, scenario list or goal list semester after semester, right? So we're always kind of churning on this topic. What can we do to make progress on it? And so as we've been having discussions, one thing we realized is like, hey, even though we've had this conversation maybe hundreds of times over the last few years, we don't have a lot of customer, verbatims that we can point to and say like, hey, this is a reason why somebody needs PowerShell 7 in Windows. And the simplest way to do that for us was like, hey, the lowest cost, what if we just open a GitHub discussion and see what people have to say? So that was the reason. That's why we did it, was just to start collecting those kind of customer stories around what it would mean to have PowerShell 7 in Windows as we continue to have conversations with internal teams about making that move. So it's really as simple as that. I think that what's been really cool is that since we've opened the discussion, there's been a lot of sub discussions about different issues that might come up with this, different things we might need to consider about, transition plans, editors, all the different types of issues that come up with whether we have them side by side, that sort of thing. So keep bringing the hard questions in there. Keep bringing, your scenarios one way or the other. There's no right or wrong answers. Each comment in there pushes us to think through different things as we have these discussions. So I see a question there. What's the best, how do we make that kind of request in the best way to be heard? So one way is like, yeah, you can tell us, but what we always say too is like, if you can go to sort of the partner team and make the request there too, that can also be really well received. So if you're going to say Windows and saying, hey, I need PowerShell 7, that can help us with the conversations as well. So that they're not just hearing from us, the PowerShell team, that we need to be there, but they're also hearing directly from customers. I'm also seeing some questions about what would happen to Windows PowerShell 5, and like whether or not we would replace them. And yeah, I think in the short term, it's very difficult. I can say that like it's very difficult to take things out of Windows. And so at least in the short term, they would probably be side by side, but that's part of the story that we would need to figure out, and nothing's going to happen overnight. So yeah, I think most likely they would be side by side, at least in the short term. Hopefully that answers most of the questions in here. I'm just reading through, but definitely feel free to keep them coming, keep using that discussion. And also if you have connections in Windows or that sort of thing, go forward and, make your request known. One other question, I think the main issue being .NET support lifecycle not matching which Windows requirements. That hasn't exactly changed, but we're trying to like figure out if we can make negotiations with different teams, find workarounds. We're all at Microsoft, so it's kind of like, hey, how can we make this work? I guess. So nothing has substantially changed in support lifecycle. It's more like, hey, can we figure something out amongst all of us together? With that, I am going to go ahead and pass things over to Jim, I believe, at this point.
Okay, so this is going to be my last call as a Microsoft employee. Calls in the future will be as a civilian. I am retiring at the end of the month. And after 25 years at Microsoft and working for some 15 plus years, I've decided that now's a good time to retire. So I'll still be around, but certainly not as part of the PowerShell team. And the first thing I'm going to do is sleep for a couple of months, and then we'll see what happens in the new year.
Well, congrats, Jim. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to add real quick. Well, let me just first say on behalf of myself and the team, I think sort of thing that Jim has done. Yes, what Jim had mentioned to me is that he'll take some time off, but I believe you are planning, at least staying within the working groups and the committee.
Some of them.
When you can, yeah. So.
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn as well if you want to send me something, some mail or whatever. But yeah. Just making that announcement.
Great. Well, congrats on your retirement. Definitely very, very well deserved. And thank you so much for all you've done for PowerShell and the team and the community over the years. You can check out the chat. There's lots of messages for you there. Are there any updates on publishing PowerShell container images in a timely way? So I believe that the PowerShell, we have published the container images for the last release. Jason, you might have a better pulse on this than I do, but I believe that they're all out at this point.
No, they're not all out yet, but
not.
they
Okay.
hopefully soon. We've been working on the pipelines, and we're at the point now to where when we do a release, like for 7.4.6, that the new container images should go out for the different distros. So we're hoping during this week.
Okay. Yeah. So we're working on releases right now, and so sounds like the pipelines are ready to go for those releases. With the 7.5 release coming soon, what are the plans for 7.6? Yeah, so as many of you know, PowerShell has typically has had a yearly release cadence. So with 7.5 coming out soon, that means we're a year away from 7.6, and 7.6 will be an LTS release. I think look forward. Hopefully Steve does a great job of posting a blog with what's coming in 7.6. But yeah, Steve, do you want to answer this one?
Yeah, I mean, you kind of basically got to like expect the team investments blog to come out early next year, hopefully January this time, or did I do that last time? I don't remember now. Early in the year, either January or February. We're still discussing internally what we're committing to for in the 7.6 release. But as Sydney said, it is a LTS. So we're trying to minimize a lot of churn. So we're gonna maybe focus a bit more on bug fixes and getting a bunch of the community PRs into the product.
Cool. So if there's something you feel passionately about 7.6, you know, we're in those discussions now. So make your voice heard on GitHub in the issues. When is the 7.5 RC coming out? We don't have a specific date, but soon. Soon. Yeah, this month. I'm also seeing that the call for papers is open for PowerShell and DevOps Global Summit. And that reminds me, I was going to make sure to make an announcement at this call too, that we really want to make sure we're supporting user groups. So if you do ever want to shout out your user group at this call, we always welcome that on the agenda. We can always promote your user group on this call, and also feel free to invite us to your user groups if you want a representative from the PowerShell team. I see another question. Any info/ETA on PowerShell 7.4 for Azure automation? Yeah, so we are working really closely with this team, and I know that they're really close to releasing it. I don't know, like, it's not my place, I guess, to give you their ETA, but it's very, very soon that they are planning on having 7.4 available, and they are planning on having it available before the 7.2 EOL, and we're working closely with them on that. Great. I think that's all the questions, and everyone got everything in. Thank you all so much for being here today. And we really look forward to having a really great celebration community call next month. I look forward to some really awesome community demos and just celebrating all the awesome work that you've all done. So thanks everyone for being here.